Karibuni, asanteni, karibuni wana Ubuntu wenzetu na asanteni kwa kuwa nasi leo. So welcome our fellow wana Ubuntu, children of Ubuntu, Africans, and thank you for being with us today. The name is Nduku, that is Kiubuntu, otherwise known as Kiswahili. The name is Nduku. I am the host on Kumbukeni. We are here countering the false narrative that Western media has put out about us, about our continent. And for those of you who joined us last night, you saw exactly how that countering is coming into effect as we sat with our cousins from Australia and we gave them a space where they could tell their narrative outside of the Rupert Murdoch propaganda that is put out about the Aboriginal people of Australia. Today, I'm joined by my sister Mabato Oke from Botswana, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today as we continue to learn and share with our brothers and sisters in the diaspora abroad, away from the motherland, about what's going on in the motherland. It's good to have people on the ground telling you exactly what the African is about, not you listening to FBA and ADOS, people who have no idea what the African is about, people who are seeing the African elite who is removed from their culture and not the African on the ground who is actually engaging with the people. So I'm glad to have our sister today so that we can talk about Botswana. Dada Mabato, please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Ndugu. Thank you so much for giving me space to share some insight on my wonderful country on this platform and also contributing to the Pan-Africanist agenda that cannot die, but can continuously be revived through our love for the continent and our love for the people of the continent's descent. My name is Mabato Oke. I'm an advocacy and communication specialist by profession. I work with different organizations, local and global, towards raising advocacy and Africa's voices in different regional and global platforms, and making sure that our policies are in line with the needs and the interests of our communities. This is not only to Botswana. I've done this on a regional basis, a continental basis with Africa, and I continue to raise to simplify a lot of complex policy towards insightful action and actionable interventions towards our inclusive development in Africa. I'm sorry, Nduku, I think you're on mute. I can't hear you.
So the whole time you're seeing me playing with the screen and you couldn't hear what I was saying? What is wrong with this host? Just playing with the screen. All right, I was trying to figure out a way to center you while I'm still on screen so that we can have a conversation, but we'll do it this way. Let's dive right into it. Resources is a big conversation on the continent because this is, as Walter Rodney wrote, the underdevelopment of our continent, and therefore we need to start here. It is our economic well-being, it is our survival. So who controls Botswana's natural resources? And we know diamond is a big thing there. How much agency does Botswana have in determining the use and benefit of these resources?
Yeah, so in Botswana, I believe it was 1969 when an act around on land and resource was developed, but particularly that on resources, including the diamond, where all resources actually belong to the state. So this is coal, uranium, and the like are all state-owned resources, and the state offers licenses towards their extraction. The diamonds are a little bit different. The state does initially owned 50% of the stake upon its discovery in 1969. But as some watchers may know, Botswana has quite significant diamond production on a global level. The world's most expensive diamond mine, or the mine that has diamonds with the highest value, is found in Botswana. It was in Hindering. It was discovered in 1973. And the relationship with the extraction of these diamonds is through Botswana, which is between the government of Botswana and the De Beers Group, which is a 50-50% joint venture, right? And also remarkably, Botswana signed a deal, I think it was in 2023, towards the ownership of stake and shares within De Beers Group, which is 30%. No other country really from our continent has done that. But although we are in ownership of our rough diamonds, and we have tried a lot towards the productions of diamonds, we don't have full ownership of its value chain. So the diamond story in Botswana almost begins and ends at the primary level of the extraction and its rough diamonds. But it's selling, the market share, government-based stores around the world, even us as citizens having the availability to buy back our own diamonds, we don't have that value chain. And we've seen the newly elected president, Advocate Dumaboko, and Honorable Minister Kumbukeni-Reclaiming actively try to change that narrative. So even from a Pan-African decolonial perspective, we are kind of seeing that on the ground, even though it's not shaped as a decolonial perspective, right? I can say as well, one of the legacies of resources, if you're looking at the neo-colonial agenda, is still rooted in an extractive-based industry. So if you look at Africa in the colonial sector, in the colonial times when our countries were treated as companies, the nature of our extractive processing hasn't necessarily shifted. Meaning that Botswana is still plagued with high inequality, high income inequality, and high levels of poverty, particularly around these areas where we find the extraction. So the mining revenue has significantly been used to develop our nation, but we still have issues of poverty, issues of lack of infrastructural development, and we're really trying to bridge that gap, because Botswana is still in the top 3 with Namibia and South Africa. And if you want to look at it critically, it is by design that South Africa, Namibia, and Botswana are top 3 of highest and equal societies. And so within our country, we've seen also on a historical level, the use of indigenous social security protections to help with the infrastructural development. So not just coming from a resource perspective in terms of what happens underneath the land, but also what happens above it. The pastoral farming and pastoral farmers are really significant towards the indigenous economic development and processes, right? So as an example, we've seen a lot of what we call motole promo, motole moto, initiative, which flatly translates to person and a cow, or person and person, where people who are pastoralists, who are farmers, either donate cattle to the khosi, which is flatly translated as chief, but I think we understand the cultural significance of a chief and the king. It's a lot more, stronger than that. But that khosi then the Bohosi is actually responsible for the financial maintenance of the sales of the cows, and then they use the cow sales to help develop their communities. So this is either through building clinics, this is either through building schools and the like. Just a fun fact: the first secondary school of the country, called Moyeng College, was actually built through mutuality, collectivism, donation of cattle, its sales, and labor, donation of labor from the people. We've seen the same nature of that collectivism and mutuality for our larger institutions. The University of Botswana was built in the same way. Some of our hospitals were built in the same way. That being said, we still obviously see a lot of the foreign direct investment, a lot of the international loans coming from the World Bank and the IMF. We still see that being coming into foreplay in the country. In the beginning of the independence in 1966, a lot of Botswana's budget was coming from direct grants from the UK, obviously reduced over time. The value of the diamond also was able to counteract building a lot of stronger credit from the country in terms of us paying back those loans and then reinvesting back into the people. There is an element of godlike favor for us to have diamonds that are so highly valued. But now we're seeing, but I'm talking about things from 50, 40 years ago, right? There's still a need to utilize our same indigenous social security systems to help, one, diversify our economy, two, not be so resource centric, and three, help build trust between the people and the government.
So you mentioned the diamond is different from other resources as far as ownership, with 50% being owned by the government. Who was the other entity you said that owned the other 50%?
Oh, yes, this was back in 1969. So De Beers owned 50% back then.
How do you spell
there
that?
was DE and then space and then BEERS. De Beers Group would be the full name. So this was back in 1969.
Yeah,
but
who are
we
they,
actually
the De Beers Group?
So it's a international private entity that was largely, I think, owned by the Oppenheimers, but I need to make sure of that.
I'm gonna check that while you speak. Yeah,
I would say that that was back in 1969. Over the years, we actually ended up losing our share of ownership, and then recently in 2025, February of this year, we renewed our deal to now getting back more ownership of our diamonds, ending up owning it over the years. So I think right now we're at a 30% ownership. The next 5 years, 40, the next 5 years from that will be at 50%. So it's still a 50-50 deal. And just a note, De Beers Group is actually, they're the ones who actually hold the full value chain of the diamond industry globally.
Of course.
But they do get 70% of that production. It does come from Botswana. And 90% of our foreign, our revenue does come from the diamonds.
Yeah. So De Beers Group was founded in 1888 by Cecil Rhodes, a British imperialist who also founded Rhodesia. Imagine that, right? You have your ancestors who existed there, but this man apparently from foreign land founded your country. And was central figure in British colonial expansion in Southern Africa. So De Beers built a global monopoly over diamond mining, trading, and marketing. It has historically operated through secretive, vertically integrated structures. So that's who this is. It's a British imperialist organization that owns part of the diamonds, and as our sister was saying, the value chain. So when you talk about the value chain, and this happens with Congo as well, our people are getting paid, and it's very minimal amounts for extracting the diamonds, the raw state of the diamond, right? And then it is sent to, we know the diamond market in New York, Wall Street, the diamond industry rather. And once it gets there, the people handling it at that point are getting much, much more. Huge difference from the people who got it from the ground. And by the time, for those of you who buy diamond rings and diamond necklaces and ear, by the time it gets on your ear, it is way more expensive than what it was first gotten from Zimbabwe. Say something, yeah. Go on.
Yeah, sorry. No, just, I mean, in Botswana's context, we have done a lot of effort in terms of ownership of that value chain. We just don't own the market. So the processing, the polishing, we really worked hard for it to be ensured that it's in-house. It was a very costly process, but most of it is done in-house. We just don't have the share, the ownership of that market in itself. And that's what we're trying to do.
What does it mean when you say very costly process? What happened?
Now I have to get into back my institutional memory, but just in terms of having to train people, polishing, having to train people, just the entire process, and even the computization around mining itself. all those different elements, that's where the expense truly came from. And then
Okay.
also the renegotiation of, because if you think about us processing, we used to send things out, right? That means European companies and European countries are benefiting from the employment opportunities that come from rough diamonds and the like. So we are taking back those employment opportunities from them.
Good.
So the costly process was that renegotiation, the importing of the localizing of technical capacities and technical capabilities. So yes, we own that process, but we still need market access, and that's what the value proposition is coming from De Beers. And I think that's probably why you've seen a lot of lab diamonds and all that conversation ongoing. But luckily, I guess for the minister, they believe that they are unfettered by it. We just need to develop ourselves beyond the diamond story, because as we know, diamonds are a luxury resource. We don't eat diamonds. We don't need the diamonds to keep the lights directly on. So it's important for us to diversify economically, utilizing our indigenous social security systems as one of the key markers towards our governance, but also utilizing our indigenous knowledge systems. If you think about our potential medicines that come from the ground,
Exactly.
our indigenous medicines that are already in use. As an example, it's called the devil's claw in English. It's typically used as part of cancer medication. That's something that the IP needs to be nationalized and owned from that level, and the factories need to be here. Right
Yes.
now, we're taking those that raw devil's claw, we're sending it out. It's called Singaparile in our local language.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for that. So let's talk about the NGOs. You mentioned the IMF and the World Bank before, but also other international loaners. So what type of NGOs dominate the development space in Botswana? How do Batswana, the people of Botswana, organize social and socioeconomic issues in their contexts? And then have these NGOs empowered the communities, or have they made them dependent on aid?
Yeah, thanks for that. So I actually work a lot in the international NGO space. But my role in working there is to advance our agendas so that the donor, the money that comes in makes sense for our country, makes sense for our agenda in nation building. And just to give a quick insight, the history of the NGO relationship in Botswana was largely became more of a boom or a stronger or a bigger relationship around the time of the HIV pandemic, which was between the 90s and the early 2000s. And this was at a time because of the nature in which HIV had hit our country. We're a very small population. At the time, we were even less than 1 million in the 90s. Right now, I think we're 2.4. And the government needed aid. It needed technical expertise and it needed aid at the time because the money just wasn't enough in terms of the sustaining and creating medicinal interventions for the people at the time. And that was what the government was informing us. However, that created a donor-led shrinking civil society. A civil society, especially when Botswana was moved from a poor country, one of the poorest countries in the world, to an upper middle country in the according to IMF's statement of what upper middle income is. So the money available for sustaining movements isn't is not as much as other countries, but even that money that's coming in is based on the priorities that are being set externally, right? So now it creates a situation where whatever movement you want to find resourced, it needs to be aligned towards anything in relation to HIV or sexual reproductive health rights, even if it's not the case, right? So that's why I say sometimes donor-led movements become harmful in that way. that they get a bit extractive. There's that lack of opportunity of technical development, technical experience, technical support, and you end up speaking in a language that is not your own. You're speaking in a language that is palatable externally, but it doesn't speak towards your community. That's one. But it also creates an opportunity. Lack of international financing allows for deep thinking towards your self-autonomization, towards business models that make sense for your community, and even funding models that make sense for your community. So what we see in Botswana from the general civil society landscape is we still see that social security system, the indigenous social security systems speak towards organizing and movement building for our country. I'm going to say this in the level of societies that we build. So I know this may be familiar to you from a Kenyan background. We have this social security system, particularly that women do, where you come together and you share your resources, you share your money for a specific goal. In our country, it's called Motelo. I'm sure that it's called something in
for those of you in the
Swahili.
Caribbean, that's the
And
susu.
those are yeah, susu, exactly. So that particular Motelo model tends to be used for fundraising purposes and also for delivering urgent aid or urgent interventions. So from a country level, it's great that we see that. But we still have different issues in our country where some minority groups still need support, but they're not getting because they have it's almost as if they're coming against the state, if that makes sense. They still need some external support. Unfortunately, for Africa, we have a very weak pan-African funding model system. We don't have a decolonial funding model system that looks at our past histories and tries to write all those regressive oppressive histories. I speak this in relation to the minority tribes in my country. Speaking of Bakwe, which Batswana would know as Basara, which the world would know as San people. Bakwe have been marginalized deeply in my country, and they tend to look for institutional support towards the autonomization, especially when it comes to issues around their indigenous practices, whether it's through the hunting or even through their displacement, their land displacement. And that's where we find international donors come to play. But it really makes my heart bleed that we don't have Pan-African, decolonial, Black Africans supporting minority groups and funding minority groups in their legislative advocacy, in their sensitization, in their media advocacy and the like. Those minority groups end up having to speak and find their voice in international spaces like the UN, but we don't necessarily see that in Pan-African institutions. We don't even have a strong voice from an AU level. We don't have a strong voice in our economic blocks like SADC and COMESA. So that's where my heart bleeds, that on an institutional level, we feel Pan-African, but we're not enacting our sentiments into codified policy, into codified institutions, into funding mechanisms for civil society groups. What Pan-Africanists want to fund are social entrepreneurships and social businesses. But you cannot monetize human dignity. You understand? We need to ensure that we're moving beyond this idea that Africa can be restored through social businesses only, and not restoration through its codification of Pan-Africanism in our infrastructure and our policies.
Yeah. So as you say that, and being a platform that is centered on representing our African stories, I'll extend the invitation to the Bakwe people. If you can speak to the elders, if they're interested in coming here and telling their story, they're more than welcome. So just if you could coordinate that, that would be great.
Yes, definitely. I'll share. There's actually somebody I know very deeply. I'll share the opportunity with that group.
Yeah. Did you hear? You heard what I said, right?
Yes, I think so.
That's so weird because my screen showed that I was muted, and I'm like, yeah, okay, we're good. I'm glad you heard me. So Botswana's success story, right? Who is it for? and this happens, I always get frustrated when I see, and it's interesting because imperialists are geniuses like this. One day they'll uplift Rwanda, they'll put Rwanda to the side, they'll uplift Kenya, they'll put Kenya to the side, they'll uplift. And to me, understanding who the imperialist system is and how they really move, I understand it means nothing when they uplift these nations. So often portrayed as a stable and prosperous African country, Botswana, whose metrics are being used. What are the unspoken truths behind the good governance and model democracy labels? How are the indigenous, and you spoke a little bit about it, how are the indigenous systems like Bogosi, chieftaincy, integrated or suppressed? You alluded a little bit to it, where the chief position is undervalued when it actually is a national leader and a very superior person, and it should be. So speak a little bit about that. This success story we hear of Botswana, what has been swept under the rug?
So I can say that our history and our identity is like everybody else. It's complex. We're neither heroes nor villains. We're neither a beacon light or we're none of these oversimplified, flat identities. That's not who we are, and that's not even how we tell our stories from an indigenous perspective. Um, but I can say that Botswana have a deep understanding, and a lot of the story of Botswana is coming from very selected truths, right? So it's coming from very selected facts. So it's not necessarily to say it's untrue, but it's to say that it's incredibly incomplete. And what completes the story is understanding the deep importance, the deep importance of our influence, the influence of our cultural indigenous governance systems influencing our good governance. That's not what they talk about. So if they want to tell the story that Botswana is a beacon light of democracy, they can say so coming from the back that we had worked really hard to restore and maintain our indigenous governance systems. And those governance systems and our principles that are rooted in collectivism and mutuality are those that built the government towards the ownership, because they don't talk about state ownership of resources, right? On a global level, if they want to talk about governance, because that means it will counteract with the idea that every individual, it counteracts with the ideals and principles of capitalism, does it not?
Exactly.
So that's why I'm saying the story is incomplete. If you want to talk about our governance, we have complex governance. We deal with looting and corruption like every other country does. We deal with looting and corruption the way the first world countries do. We have systems that we have institutions that we don't believe are fully working.
Yeah.
We believe that they can work better. We have a very, very deep trust within our community, working with each other, working alongside each other. I saw a lot of that deep trust during the elections in my country. We knew that we needed a new political party. And without saying anything, Botswana weirdly understood which party to vote for. And this is not me. I'm not somebody who is, talking about party politics. But all Botswana had to say in the public sector, in the public spectrum, sorry, in public facilities, public transport and the like, Botswana told each other, loosely translating to vote wisely. Imagine nobody is saying anything like what we see in the global north countries. There's a lot of polarizing content where people end up physically fighting each other. But there are people who are supporting different party systems, right? Different political parties. But all we had to tell each other is just vote wisely. Imagine the trust of a stranger. And a lot of that is coming from it's coming from the principles of the Setswana language, which is, indigenous to us, of course. But it's also coming from the principles of the mutuality and love for the land. You cannot make that in a textbook. You cannot import that from Europe. That is 100% African and African grown. So that's an element that's not coming out of there. Because if you are going to fully speak about our governance system and the trust that we're building, you're telling Africans to love their country, to love their land. And if we love our land, we're going to love what's underneath it as well. That's why they need to ensure that the stories that they're telling are half baked. They can't tell the full thing, because when they tell the full story, they end up weakening their soft position and their soft power, right?
Yeah.
So that's one. But we also, as a country, we face different challenges, and I think those are the challenges that aren't shared. When I was speaking towards minority groups and minority rights, we do have Setswana is a national language, but not everybody in Botswana is Setswana speaking. And not everybody who is a Setswana speaking Botswana has a genealogy that is solely Setswana speaking. And the nation building and the nation unity, particularly using Setswana as a language, has inadvertently erased a lot of power of those languages. So we still have this opportunity to incorporate indigenous languages in schools beyond Setswana, just to keep them alive, and still see those languages being used economically. I know from the ground level, we have a lot of indigenous non-Setswana speakers, or people who are not coming from Setswana-oriented tribes, like Kalanga, Barumbuku, Shibayeyi. I've seen some of them come up with like apps to indigenize their languages and give them a digital footprint, which I think is great. We just need to encourage that support from a national level. My country doesn't have any community radio stations. That's another way to preserve language and keep it alive. Recently, I think this year we saw from the Botswana Communications Regulatory Authority offer licenses for community radio stations. So you see, there's still that aspect of internal nation building that we need to harness upon and see this opportunity for. But that's the real full story. We have very, very similar parallel issues to other African nations, but there's a reason why they want to tell half a story and not the full story.
And usually I say the success of an African country is based on the access that country has given the imperialist interests. So the more access you give, the more you get a light shined on you, right? If you're a country like Burkina Faso, who's taking away that, who's standing in your self-determination, no, you're not as progressive and you're not as successful as Botswana. That was a good segue to traditional systems versus Western development models in Botswana, right? How have the Botswana indigenous ways of organizing society, economy, and justice been eroded? Or how have they been preserved? And then what can we, the rest of Africa, the Pan-Africanists, the global African community, learn from Tswana communal practices that reflect Ubuntu? And this is great because I'm glad that we get to sit with you, Batswana person, who will talk about Ubuntu and the fact that you have identified it throughout generations in Botswana. And then are the young people reconnecting, because this is a problem we are facing globally, are the young people reconnecting or detaching from these traditions? Are they moving towards Westernization or reclaiming the Botswana traditions from the different nations that you mentioned?
Yeah, wow, what a loaded question. I don't even know where to begin. So coming from the where do I even start? So from in terms of our traditional systems, let me say this. Yes, Boto is not just Boto, which is Ubuntu, right? Boto for us is not just a philosophy. It's more than a philosophy. It's more than a principle. It's actually a governance intervention. So in our systems, we had in our governance systems, we had court systems as well. The court, which is what we call a khotla. So the khotla is not just a space for judicial proceedings. It's also a platform for democratized conversations. So in this khotla,
that's like the in Congo, it's the Mbongi, the gathering of the community.
Yeah, It's the
Yeah.
gathering of the community, yes. So within that khotla session, there's a narrative, or that is a principle that we have called mafuko tle- mafuko a khotla a mantle otlhe. Ish, I'm not saying it right. I hope I don't disappoint my people. But it's basically to say all the words that are spoken in the khotla are beautiful words. But so it encourages dialogue, even if it's
Everyone to
even if
speak.
it's polarizing. So in this world of digitization and echo chambers that we're developing, that have been developed, that counter the idea of opposing ideas, the khotla system encourages that. We have had democracy way before what they're claiming they introduced to us. But our democratized processes were just more
Right.
meaningful, they were more deeply consultative, and they spoke towards the needs of everyone. Um, what I can say in terms of its erasure, the erasure of our governance processes is we have seen the loss of the role, the deep and meaningful role of women and young people in our indigenous governance systems, because we used to have different sects, and all those people with different sects had different roles. Um, there we go. Bafuka Khotla Mantlo. Thank you, Lifika. I knew I was gonna get dragged for that.
Asante
Yeah,
Lifika.
but everybody had different roles. And due to the different roles, there was also the initiation of girls and boys. There were all these different practices that helped inform governance, right?
Yeah.
And instead of seeing their constant evolutionizing and adaptation, we ended up seeing erasure. And I'm not here to say that our governance systems were perfect. I'm not here to say that our governance systems were non-violent or non-harmful. Some people were harmed and some people were violated. My only issue is that the response to the violation was its erasure, and not in its interrogation and evolution. And I
But
think that that's
also,
something that.
but also taking on a practice from a culture that is even more violent,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
The irony,
That
taking on.
systematically is more violent and doesn't work. So if you think about our legislative institution, legal proceedings, the penal code, putting people in and out of jail, the bail, it's cyclical, but it's not restorative. It's not restorative justice. And so there's so many elements from our indigenous systems that can inform restorative justice. However, the adoption of Roman laws erases that, and it even perpetuates inequality. It even perpetuates poverty from a global scale. So those are just the elements that I can speak towards in terms of our governance and legislative systems that we're seeing being erased. As I did share, the role of women and youth in leadership has been deeply, deeply erased, even within our indigenous custom systems. They've been deeply erased. The introduction of customary laws in the colonial times almost blanketed our political systems. There were over 2,000 polities in Africa, but somehow all of our custom laws are very, very unified. They almost speak to the same thing. They're
They
not
do.
uniquely different in any sense. So how are we holding on to these customary laws that sound so synonymous if we have such deeply different political systems from an indigenous point of view, you know? So the continuous flattening of our cultures, the continuous flattening of our indigenous and governance systems contributed towards this erasure. But I do think that there is a lot of hope towards rebuilding ourselves within, whether it's within our storytelling, the preservation of our language, but it should be through the codification of our systems that we know that we do have that can help enforce progression in our country. And especially if we look at it from a lens of restorative justice, if we look at it from a lens of poverty eradication, if we look at it from a lens of economic inclusion, just whole, social cohesion, then we'll be able to build from that angle.
Yes. And then also quickly, are the youth moving away from culture? Are they embracing Western culture more?
Yeah, it really. So I'll say yes in some instances, right? because we have to think about it this way. Right now, for our country, Botswana is economically centralized in terms of economic opportunity. So we do find a lot of young people migrating from rural areas to the urban areas for education and economic opportunities. That can innately erase so much of a person's identity as they try to adapt into an urban environment, to an urban city, right? So if we find ourselves decentralizing these opportunities, these education and economic opportunities, if we decentralize them, we will still find young people who are still proud of their culture and still engaging in that culture in a more deep and meaningful way. I used to live in the north of Botswana in a place called Maum. And there were a lot of, I would interact with some young people who come from the surrounding villages, Seronga and the like. And a lot of them have, because Maung is a place that is, it's largely informing the tourism economy of the country. So a lot of young people are really interested in ecotourism and becoming guides. What they admire from the guides is the guides' storytelling. And the guides have a lot of this information passed on to them from their ancestors about the area they live in, and the animals, and even some deep insightful knowledge about the wild animals in their region. So that's another way I can say, that's I'm like yes or no, that's a way I can say that I can see culture being restored on that aspect, but I don't see it being promoted. So because it's not promoted from a national level, because we don't have that celebration of diversity from a national level, we see young people who, if they don't want to be in the tourism industry, they would rather come to Gaborone, to the city, and then that's where all this erasure happens, because there's that loss that happens as well. But there is so much opportunity. That's what I'm saying. If we're looking from an angle of economic inclusion, of diversification of the economy from that Pan-Africanist cultural lens, there's so many aspects towards our sovereignty that we can fix, but our cultural heritage, is part of the solution.
Yeah, that's the same thing happening in Kenya. And now when I go back home, I don't even stay in Nairobi, because Nairobi is just like America. I don't want to be. I call it the Americanization of Kenya, right? I don't want to be. I left America to come home for a reason. I don't want to experience that when I'm at home. And so for me, being in the rural area is so much more rewarding when I go home, where there's not the loud music, the twerking, the calling each other the N word on the motherland, like as if, hello.
And the B word.
Yeah, right. And the walk-in closets and the apparently housewives of Nairobi. Are we serious right now? So I completely get it.
Yeah.
And you're right. Unfortunately, when young people are put in that environment to fit in, they're forced to adopt those horrible, horrible cultural practices that move away from our community-centered and humanity uplifting cultural practices. So that's, again, a great segue to the next question: the impact of education and language. Is education in Botswana still colonial? Is Setswana prioritized over English? What other indigenous languages, because you mentioned a few nations who I'm certain speak other languages, exist, and are they modeled into the curriculum? And then the one and only language of unity and Pan-Africanism, Swahili, otherwise known as Kiubuntu, because we are taking ownership of this language. Is it promoted in Botswana, and is it being taught? How are the schools shaping or not shaping consciousness towards liberation?
Okay, so the Swahili question in terms of the language adoption, no. That's just a quick no. But I think there are classes that are available, so it's still.
So you and I need to work on that. You and I need to work on that and make sure that changes next year. Yes.
But I can say that it's very difficult to incorporate a Pan-African language if the language from the ground isn't incorporated in our schools. I hope that you understand.
But guess
the model of education in our country.
Real quick before you go, and this is how I promote Kiubuntu, right? And this is why we call it Kiubuntu. all those languages in Botswana are represented in Kibuntu. Those are the languages that created it. So if we focus on that, if we reach the people that way, this is a language that was brought together by all of these languages. Listen, you'll hear certain words in Kibuntu that are in Tswana, that are in other languages in it. So I think that's
Ubuntu.
This is the thing that we need to focus on. And I think the thing too is, as we promote this language of unity, we also have to promote the revival and representation of all other indigenous languages that made it. And I agree with you. Absolutely. I agree with you.
Yeah, I deeply agree that it's something that can happen concurrently. But I should say our education system, honestly, and there's so many recitation. I do some.
Hold on, real quick. The connections are a little choppy.
Interventions that are coming from the state around it.
Hold on, real quick. Let's give it a minute to get stable, and then you can start over because it was choppy. All right, go back. Please start over. Yes, thank you.
Yes. So I was saying, what was I saying? Yes, that there's a deep need for a revitalization of not just education, but education and training in Botswana. That still needs to speak to our local needs. The adoption of education, yes, you can see, smell, hear, breathe, and touch the colonial presence within our education systems. But you don't necessarily see the strong footprint. Yes, Setswana is incorporated into our languages, into the language models of teaching. However, we still don't see, not every Botswana is Setswana speaking. So we still don't see in the northern areas those different languages. And we also don't have an opportunity of even learning some of those languages, even if I'm not a speaker. So just to give an example with South African institutions, there are some schools that offer all 11 official languages to learn. And I studied in South Africa myself in my high school and a little bit of my primary school. I was able to learn Zulu in a classroom. I was able to learn Sepedi in a classroom. I was able to learn Setswana in a classroom, even Afrikaans in a classroom. Afrikaans, I know a lot of people think it's Dutch-owned. It's actually the kitchen language. It's a Creole language that was informed by indigenous South Africans and Asians as well. And trying to learn the Dutch language. So I was able to learn all these different languages in the classroom. And I wish for Botswana to have an opportunity that within your classroom, you can learn Sekhalakari, you can learn Kalanga, you can learn Setswana with English and another, European foreign language. It's meaningless. But for me, the opportunity to learn different languages in my country, to learn Botswana Sign Language, to learn BSL, it would be such a transformative experience. I will get to appreciate and understand another culture, and it would even make me want to work in that region. That's the promotion of economic diversification that I speak towards. I did say that the state had developed an intervention. They had an education and training sector strategic plan that was developed between 2015 and 2020 towards its intervention. But their intention was to strengthen the labor market, the labor market with education and training. I don't know if it fully aligns with the idea of economic diversification that is informed by Pan-Africanism, the Pan-Africanism that is rooted in celebration of our indigenous identities and history. I don't know if it informs that, but I do know that that was an intervention that they wanted to put in. But I can tell you that it's not where, for me, I am not fully satisfied with it. It's not where I think it could be. I think there's a lot of tapped in opportunity that we're just overlooking because our lens is to the global north or the global minority. Our lens is not to the global majority or to Africa.
Yeah. And we just learned, at least I just learned about South Africa and something very revolutionary that they're doing, that they're teaching all those languages in the schools. And that's a great, great, great thing. I know for us, it depends on where you go to school. And it's not the the higher schools. Like, for example, the village,
Mm-hmm.
the town where I come from, the elementary school, to a certain extent, to a certain grade, they teach Kamba because that's Kamba region, right? But in that school, they don't teach Luo, they don't teach Kikuyu, they don't teach other languages. But I'm certain if you go to Kikuyu land, Kikuyu is being taught in those schools. So it would be nice to see, like you said, in high school, national high schools, provincial high schools, because that's how, if they're still divided like that in Kenya, in universities, these languages being offered, because guess what? There are multiple Kikuyu people who are qualified in teaching Kikuyu, multiple Luo people qualified in teaching Luo. And like you said, it promotes that unity and understanding of each other, and it makes your fellow Kenyan not foreign to you, but you see yourself in them, in understanding their language and their culture, and that's great that South Africa is doing that. An important topic on the continent right now, a very important topic. And this week, my sister, unfortunately, you found me in an exhausted, spiritually exhausted state, but I'm still holding it down and still doing the work that's necessary. But I am truly spiritually drained this week. Health, healing, and African spirituality, right? How are traditional healers and spiritual practices viewed in Botswana today? Is the health system fully biomedical, NGO controlled, like it is in Kenya and other African countries, or do people still seek indigenous healing? Do Botswana people? I remember one time my cousin, we were at my grandma's. My grandma is long gone now, and she had this pain that comes in your diaphragm, right? And my grandma took her to see a lady who helped her. They do a hot cupping that lifts it and the pain goes away. So indigenous healing, right? Do Botswana people still do that? And what's the role of the elders and oral knowledge in community well-being, in promoting these health practices that are grounded in African spirituality?
Yeah. So this is also complex. There are some people who still have it's really almost individualistic from person to person. There are some people who still have a trust with indigenous healing methods, particularly herb-based healing methods, and the others that trust the public institution, the state run or private run institutions, biomedical health interventions. I personally believe that there's opportunity for integration that should be rooted in fairness and justice. I believe that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done towards destigmatizing and removing the demonization of indigenous healing mechanisms, particularly those that are rooted in spiritual well-being and wellness. And this is not to say that there isn't, dark arts or dark energy that doesn't exist in this world. There's a lot of dark arts and dark energy that exists in, religious institutions. But this is to say that there is a lot of work that needs to be done in forming and building relationships that are rooted in restorative justice between health workers, health practitioners, and indigenous indigenous healers and herbal-based doctors, because we know that there are people who still rely, especially during the COVID period. There were a lot of people who relied on herbal medicines for immune boosting reasons, and for also just maintenance of their health. That people who still, and I do as well, that still use different herbs for their overall well-being. There is just a lack of that appreciation and codification from a legislative point of view. But we know that when we make things, when we codify and we make legislative models, we start putting price tags to these models as well, which starts creating inaccessibility. So that's why I'm saying it needs to be rooted in restorative justice. Restorative meaning that it should restore the relationship of patient to healer. It should restore the relationship of patient to healer, patient to patient, and healer to health practitioner. And as you can see, I'm very careful with my language of health practitioner and traditional healer. but it really should be rooted in creating equal power between the two, and also equal accessibility across the board. I think, unfortunately, the country is very far from being self-determined towards the production of biomedical production. We're still receiving imported medicine. Our pharmaceuticals are still imported. And there isn't a lot of research and development funding towards advancing a lot of that biomedical indigenous biomedicines. That it's not there yet. That's why I was talking about the Singaparila earlier on. That why aren't we having these factories here? Why aren't we producing the pills here? Why aren't we running trials here? And why aren't we doing it in a way that speaks to our needs? You know. So a lot of things are still not really owned. I think that there's a lot of focus on non-renewables, what's happening underneath the land, but there's a lot of ownership on above the land that needs to happen as well.
And it goes to what you were talking about, social economics, right? But more centered in the well-being of the people, the needs of the people. I always say we need research centers, research facilities on the continent, because we are consuming substances that have been created by those who history has shown were harming us. History has shown want to eliminate us, literally. Our oppressor is making the medicine and we're consuming it without knowing what's inside it. And a few groups have shown that some of that medicine is detrimental. In Kenya, one of the doctors, Dr. Wahome, and a group of other doctors, Pan-African doctors, put on blast the tetanus shot that was being put out a few years ago because it was sterilizing the women, you know, something like that. You don't know if that has been put by these people who want to destroy your people and your culture in whatever we are consuming. So you're right. It's important that we have research run by African people, African grounded people, not the elite who want to impress the whites and who want to do the master's bidding, but African people centered in African spirituality. We need those research centers and places where we can advance the medicine that we already understand and distribute it among our people and make it more popular. Pan-Africanism, right? You and I and our sister who brought us together are Pan-Africanists. And we are Pan-Africanists beyond the word. We are Pan-Africanists beyond Museveni and all the other people who've betrayed Pan-Africanism. We live Pan-Africanism. We don't just speak it. I see my sister in Botswana. She is my sister. I don't see any difference between she and I. I want us to learn the language so that we can empower ourselves, a language that is uniting us, but also understanding that we cannot dismiss the other languages in the continent. And in fact, through embracing this language of unity, we empower the other languages that created it, right? Bringing in the West African languages that are not represented. So that is who we are as Pan-Africanists. I will eat your food and enjoy it, not feeling as if it's taking away from my food. I will dress in your attire and represent Botswana, still understanding I'm Kenyan, and tomorrow I might decide to wear Kenyan attire, right? I will sing and dance to your music, not feeling like it's taking away from my music. This is something that's happening now, my sister. As ridiculous as it sounds that I'm mentioning that, in festivals now, Africans are complaining, oh, there was too much Afrobeat. There was too much Caribbean music.
Right. I recently facilitated a conference where there were complaints that there was not enough of that.
Do you all understand?
Let's have a playlist. Like, I don't know.
Do you all understand that this music is all one music, really? And it is influenced originally from African music. So our people are a little ignorant nowadays. So Pan-Africanism and regional unity. How do the people in Botswana see themselves in the context of Pan-Africanism and bringing that, I'll call it a national unity, a continental unity in Africa? Is there support for African language unity, dual citizenship for the brothers and sisters who are abroad, especially those who are taken from the land forcefully? And then how can Botswana be a part of the greater Ubuntu-based renaissance? So the Ubuntu-based Pan-Africanism is what we're talking about, where I understand that when you say Botu, you mean Ubuntu, right? When I say Utu in Kubuntu, Utu, which is humanity, I mean Ubuntu. So yes, please speak on that.
Yeah, I think it's what I did share earlier, that Pan-African sentiment, truly, we have failed it. We have failed to encode and codify Pan-African sentiment into our policy interventions, into our laws, into our economic product processes and productivity. We failed to do so. And I say that because Pan-Africanism, first of all, is an ideology that has decided to place itself. I think I'm frozen. Please let me know if you can hear me.
No, I can hear you. I can hear you.
I'm frozen.
I can hear you.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, so Pan-Africanism is an ideology that has decided to find itself behind, between, academic pages and the ivory towers of the academic institutions. Sometimes, luckily through the internet, Pan-Africanism has found itself with niche media pages and media groups such as this one. But it's not found in our national television programming. It's not found, in our national radio programming. It's not found where the people are. Where people find other Africans, especially from a low income level, is when we're finding people who are looking towards the same economic opportunities. Because we have been shut out of our own economic markets and our own labor markets, we're pretty much scurrying for very, very scarce resources. Then the African next to me is no longer the African next to me as my competition. The resources and the opportunities that are sourced through white monopoly capital and other forms of monopoly capital, we don't see ourselves in them. We have decided that we're going to fight for this little bit. So the idea of spreading Pan-African unity becomes very difficult to market, because you're trying to convince me that my bread and butter is going to be taken away by somebody who's next to me who's also African. That's why in my country we're not necessarily seeing a lot of that Pan-African unity encoded into our laws and into our policies. However, I can say from the president's lens, I have seen that he has shared some sentiment towards regional integration, which I think is a good thing. And I think that from a Pan-African level, with our elites, especially the Pan-African elites who have betrayed us, there needs to be some sort of justice movements towards that, but those levels of betrayals. Because what we find is that it's very difficult, as I did tell you, to tell people, to try to convince another African that your fellow African is your friend, when we both don't have the resources to share, the infrastructural development to both share and celebrate on. Though our predecessors have celebrated and shared on them. When Zimbabwe was doing very well in the 1980s, Batswana benefited a lot. South Africans benefited quite a lot. Now Zimbabwe isn't doing very well, and we feel very strongly against their integration into our communities. They also feel it deeply insecure with the communities that they migrate into. Nigeria was doing extremely well in the 1960s, and extremely well, giving out grants left, right, and center to every other African country. Today, any Nigerian we see, we believe we're going to get scammed. No other backing beyond it. Forgetting how we helped each other during the independence era, right? So something as simple as scarce resources can completely affect our ideologies that we have decided to put in academic institutions and make them, inaccessible. So there's a lot that we need to change. And I'm telling you that the root of our change is based on economic diversification and centering our countries from being resource-led and extract-informed to being informed by knowledge that is coming from our indigenous communities, knowledge that is coming from our indigenous memory, and literally just selling ourselves to each other. That's all we need to do.
Yes, we need to have a better marketing movement of each other to each other, and a constant and consistent reminder of these stories that you're talking about. Every time a Botswana makes a mistake to open their mouth and express their disgust of Zimbabweans, remind them exactly what Zimbabwe did for Botswana. Every time a South African opens their mouth to express their ignorance towards Nigerians, remind them exactly what Nigeria did for a lot of African nations. And we are thinking about putting together something like this. Hold on, I see my sister's internet is acting up. Let's give her a minute. Let's give her a minute to come back on. And this is a challenge. It's interesting because this is one of my questions, pending questions. What internet are we using, right? She's coming back on. Let's give her a minute. So yeah, thank you. She's back. Yeah, there you go. It's funny because I am thinking of, hold on, let's get you back again. There we go. And then I have to switch you. There you go. All right. Yes. So maybe repeating these stories of how we used to help each other and being consistent in telling them, and building our own organizations. And I'm glad because you will get to talk about your organization that is in its inception, that where we will take on these education projects and these liberating projects outside of the neo-colonialist powers right now. So you mentioned the women before and the youth, but let's focus a little bit about on the women, because you and I are women, and we have been marginalized, and we have been taken away from the structure of family on our continent because our people have embraced Western culture that is very male-centered. How are Swana women reclaiming leadership, land, and legacy, and what matriarchal roots still influence resistance today in Botswana? Are you still there, sis? I can see you. I can see you moving. Yeah. Hold on. Do you hear me? Yeah, the connection is acting up. Let me just send a sister a quick message. I'm gonna ask her to sign out and back in. Continue to speak on the topic. Yes. So I'm happy that first of all, this is something that I always forget to do. Please subscribe, like, and share this channel. I always forget to ask you all to subscribe. And that's because I'm comfortable with us growing slowly. I will not deny that it would be nice to be financially liberated and to have this as a platform that allows us financially to do the work full time, right? But our main focus is to share what we talk about here. So please subscribe, please like this broadcast and other broadcasts, and please share them because the goal is to reach more Wana Ubuntu globally. So can you hear me now, Mabato?
Yes, I can.
All right, perfect. So
sorry,
there's
I'm having a faulty internet now, but I can hear you clearly. Can you hear me?
It was a little choppy, so It was a little choppy. Say something so that I see how it's coming through. Can you hear me? All right. Okay. I am going to wait for Mabata to be reconnected. Let's just remove her and bring me back on. Mabata, please check the private chat. Please check the private chat. I just sent you a message. Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. So, like I was saying before, subscribe, like, and share the channel. But we keep talking about, the goal. Exactly, Nini, exactly. And it's unfortunate that our sister, hopefully she can come back on, was kicked off, or her internet is acting up right when we are talking about the African woman and bringing her back in her rightful place in community. But I am happy that we have someone on the ground talking about Botswana, and not just people outside of the community who don't understand, because we learn a lot. You get to learn about the nations of the land that are not represented. You get to learn a lot about the daily challenges that people of Botswana. Can you hear me now, Mabato?
Yes, I can. I'm
Perfect.
hoping
So
this time I can stay on.
yes, talk about the women. Let's quickly, without wasting time, talk about the women. Yes, please.
You did say women and their role in leadership, their power in accessing it, right?
Yeah, let me rephrase. Let me repeat the question. So, how are the Swana women reclaiming leadership and legacy, and their rightful place in the family? And then, what matriarchal roots still influence resistance today?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, so women in leadership in Botswana is actually it's a really complex experience because of the historical erasure during the colonial period of women holding any seating in leadership on a deeper level, but also their role within society. I can say that though over the years there's been a lot of activism from women in regaining their power and their seats from a Pan-African level. Thousands of the late 90s, the three Musi sisters who informed a landmark case towards of, of ownership of land and inherited land, especially because before women weren't allowed to inherit land. It was one of the codifications of the customary laws, which doesn't speak to the indigenous governance systems, but speaks to the colonial systems of governance. So we've seen, those type of landmark cases being brought about, but we're also seeing a spike, an increase in intimate partner violence and femicide. And there are a lot of, you know, uh, undercurrents that inform this intimate partner violence and femicide and killing of women and young women. And a lot of that is rooted in social norms and cultural norms that have been adopted but are not of us. Um, and there is this lack of coming from different actors from the state to have a deeper understanding and meaning of why women are being killed at such alarming rates, especially women who are in relationships. What leads to men killing women in these relationships? Why is killing an option, and the like? And I think that also needs to be interrogated. I work with a group called GBV SOS, and we deal with a lot of pro bono cases and helping women, and also we're also bringing policy advocacy into making the laws speak towards issues that are in relation with femicide, in relation with filicide, especially for children, and undermining the different abuses of women, and also gender minorities. But I can say from a political level, in terms of political leadership, we have seen a lot of growth in the area of women taking up leadership within political space, whether it's parliamentary, but we're also seeing leadership from a Bohosi level. We have a very, very strong Khosi who leads the tribe, and has done a lot of work to fight for and retain the customary land rights and land ownership in the Balete region. And I think that's one of the few women leaders that, that sprout up, that show a lot of power. So there is a lot of what we can say women figures and women leaders from a public point of view. But that role from within the household, we're seeing a lot of single woman headed households. And we're not necessarily seeing that role on a deeper level where all genders are celebrated, all genders are respected from, societal, social norms level basis. And I think that's one thing that Batswana women also who are in South Africa and Lesotho have parallel experiences about and are trying to mitigate. But we all know that this is not something this is not a gender specific problem. This needs everybody on the table. This needs men who also understand the systematic issues to come and work with us to create more equal leadership positions and also more equal space.
Our sister was taken off again. Sorry about that, Mabato. So just bear with us, please. Bear with us. I'm glad we had our sister joining us today and hopefully she'll be brought back in to finish that conversation. It's good to know. And I shared a few links in the chat about the Musi sisters, MMUSI, the Musi sisters. It's a case, and there's record of the case in both. One of them is a journalist report, and the other one is the actual case. Where they fought for women's right to own land in Botswana. Again, it's important to have representation from the ground about these countries, about the nations in Africa. And here comes our sister again. Please all, let me just say something. Kumbukeni is not about perfection. Right? Let me just say that. Kumbukeni is not about perfection. We have internet issues on the continent and you will all have to bear with us. That is what is going on. So this is going to happen when we are struggling with the internet, the back and forth. Mabato, continue, please, where you left off.
Yeah, I pretty much wrapped up. So I'm saying that it's overcoming or achieving equitable women leadership and women's rights within our society is not an issue that should be done by women alone. Even Thomas Sankara said women carry half of the sky. So it needs everybody to come on board and to work together towards.
I agree. I keep saying this. I'm done with the fight of the men are doing this, the women are doing this, the men are doing this, the women are doing this, and we are caught up in the fight instead of the solution process where we all come together and acknowledge our role in the dysfunction, and then all together take responsibility and come up with solutions. So this is good to know.
Exactly.
As we encounter technological challenges in the broadcast today, who is controlling technology in Botswana? Who has ownership of the internet? How is it distributed? Is it equitable or not? Right? We might as well talk about it since it's happening as we speak.
Clearly not. Maybe we could segue into the organization that I'm starting because it's around
Yes,
it.
please. Let's do that.
So,
talk about it
yeah.
and then talk about the organization. Yes, please.
Yeah. So I've been working in internet governance for quite some time. Not necessarily from a technical point of view. I hope I'm still audible. Okay, you're not.
Yes, you
frozen.
are. Yes.
Okay. So not from a technical point of view, from a non-technical digital rights point of view, working with, as I did say, bringing up our advocacies from the ground to the global stages. And one thing I realized about internet governance and tech is that it's deeply, deeply Western. And the ownership and the value chain isn't necessarily spread across. But they are very key figures. There we go. Agree. Yeah, my husband says the same thing. He says that the punitive action towards men who beat women is very low in this country. And then when men should use their masculinity to inform punitive action.
I like that solution. Yes. Check them. Check your brothers. Yes, I agree. Continue.
I think, okay, there I am. Okay. Yeah, so there are some key people who have done a lot of work in telecommunications and bridging that digital divide. We know Strive Masiwa has done.
Yo, listen, this internet on the continent is something else. So we had someone who asked, is Botswana's, oh, sorry, there you are, you're back. I'm glad you're laughing about it, because sometimes you just have to laugh about it. I'm glad you're laughing about it.
We love to keep from crying.
Keep talking. Let's not waste any time. Keep talking. Take from where you are.
Yes.
Yeah, pick up from where you are.
Yes. So yeah, we do have it's incredibly far known, and the way Batswana, especially young people, are considered in terms of the value chain process is end user, right? So it's either us as consumers or develop tech solutions, but we're not part of the digital infrastructure, we're not part of the tech infrastructure, especially. And having been exposed to what happens in Geneva and what happens in DC when it comes to internet governance and digital infrastructure, I'm really, really keen on developing an organization in Botswana that focuses on digital rights and equitable digital infrastructure that ensures that there's accessibility everywhere, but it also ensures that we're part of the value chain from the infrastructure that's being built and not just as end users. So it's a new organization. It's called Cyber Envoys Africa. Cyber Envoys Africa. And the main aim is to create, reduce the digital divide and be part of the digital solution from an infrastructure perspective and also from a regulatory perspective. So yeah, I'm hoping I can find more people who are keen in partnering and collaborating with me. We are in a very, very inception phase, a very, very early phase of the organization. So I would like to at least join in when my internet is working and even offline, and be able to create interventions that way. And just another thing to share though, because there's such a strong internet reliance, a lot of our solutions in Africa that work are telecommunication solutions, not digital ones. So your radio,
Yes. And our sister is right about that. I remember growing up with my grandma playing the radio a lot. as we visited her during the holidays. And even today, I see Kenyans posting about radio stations that are informing them, and they're using them to reach the people on the ground. So telecommunication is a bigger reach. But given the sorry, I'm writing this as I speak. Given also the advancement of especially the phone, this is the thing that is most is popular on and affordable to the people on the ground. Then it becomes important how they are accessing the internet, and then also for them to access these broadcasts where we are educating and decolonizing the minds of Africans. Just pick up where you left off. Don't even wait for me to ask a question. Keep talking.
Yeah, no, just to say that, yeah, telecommunication services that are analog, that's still incredibly popular in Africa. They're the ones that work. So we need to make sure that those analog modalities are not forgotten, and that they can still exist within our communities, and that we can encourage people to use both internet and the digital and the analog cohesively.
Especially when the time comes where the digital might fall apart, at least we have a plan B. We have something to fall back on. We are not completely dependent on it. Exactly. Someone asked in the, right? Because nothing is forever. Someone asked in the comment, is Botswana's involvement in organizations like the South African Development Community, SADC, reflective of Pan-African principles in promoting unity, development, and cooperation across Africa?
I can say somewhat, but not fully. So somewhat meaning that there is, from a political level, some level of integration. They have developed programmatic interventions for regional integration from a business perspective, from economic development perspective. But because SADC is largely funded by GIZ, the Southern African Development Community is largely funded by a German institution. It will operate, the interventions will operate in accordance to the financial, the interventions will operate in accordance to the financial regulations.
The interests of the German entity.
So that's really it. It's largely funded by EU and GIZ. Like the African Union is largely funded by the European Union. So our economic blocks aren't self-determined. So their interventions are going to speak towards the funding requirements that are coming out of Europe. Long story short.
And I'm glad you said that, because I say this all the time when I speak to our people. Just because something is called African on the continent does not mean it's African. You're the one who's going to have to do the investigation, go search it, search who's funding it. That's important. Who their partners are, that's important. And you'll find the Mzungu sitting there comfortably, running the whole show. I, for example, encountered on LinkedIn Kenyan Wall Street, right? And so here I am proud that there's a Kenyan Wall Street, despite the fact that naming it Wall Street is another. Wall Street was the block where enslaved Africans were sold. That is how that word comes. That's how it is. That's the origin of that word. So for any African who wants to be liberated, to name anything Wall Street is just a whole contradiction of the whole process. So that's a story for another day. But once I saw Kenyan Wall Street, the person who leads it is American white man. An American white man leads it. And they had a session where two Kenyan sisters are in conversation with this white American man about issues in Kenya, a man who cannot relate to the issues in Kenya. This is the problem we have. When you have African entities that are meant to solve African problems run by Western entities that have their own interests and prioritize their own interests, then there's nothing African about it. Sister, what do you want to say in closing as we wrap up? What do you want us to walk away with today as we wrap up?
Yeah, so in closing, a lot of Botswana's wins towards our narratives that we reshape and belong to us came from the communities. They didn't come from the top. They came from the bottom that informed the top. And I want us to have that in mind when we think about building solutions for our country. Let us collaborate more laterally across each other, meaningfully with each other. And even when we enter international spaces, let us have a very clear agenda in mind so that we walk away knowing that our agenda has been fulfilled. If we're looking to collaborate with partners because we don't exist in a volume, let us not forget the core needs of our countries and inform our representatives to ensure that we are
All right.
advocacy from that point of view, not what funding is available and how can I align.
Say that one more
But
time because we lost you.
and not as
Say
a
that
form
one
of
more, that last
funding.
sentence one more time. Sorry,
Okay,
sorry. The two last sentences.
Yes. When we enter global spaces, let us enter them with our very clear agenda in mind and make sure that our agenda has been fully set, has been fully met, and that funding isn't a favor, but it is a form of repairing the previous injustice to our countries. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great advice to the coons out there. Stop cooning. I'm sorry, my sister. I have to call it what it is. Stop tap dancing and make sure you're calling the shots when you sit at those tables. Their ancestors, and they continue to harm us. So when there's opportunity for them to fund, you tell them, cut the check and be quiet, and we will decide what we do with the money, or just step aside and get out of our way. So thank you so much for being with us. I look forward to working with you, especially when it comes to Ubuntu and making it more acceptable to the people of Botswana. And also, don't forget my invitation to the if I remember, where did I write it? The Bakwe people, please speak to the elders and have them come to join us. And that conversation can be the beginning of talking about Ubuntu and how it relates to what's the language that the Bakwe people speak.
There are many languages, right? But the most common one is Naro. It's very clicky. There's a lot of clicks in that language.
Look at that. The similarity between that and the Nkosa in South Africa, like we are one people. So I look forward to sitting with them and talking about their nation and the language and how it is seen in Ubuntu, and making sure that more of us globally know that they exist and know what their culture is about.
Sure.
Right?
If anything, the Xhosas are like the children of the Bakwe in terms of the language in itself. Yeah.
Imagine that. I look forward to learning more about that. Yeah, I look forward to learning more about that. Thank you so much. Be well, my sister, and I'll be seeing you in these Pan-African streets. Thank you, everyone. Asanteni.
Thank you so much. Asante sana.
There you go. See? Aya, kwaherini.